All right. So we're going to start our conversation today about ranch and farm directories, brand books, various kinds of rural directories. And what do you do when you've got a small place? And I'll describe Ferndale, Montana to you and the lack of records that I've found in Ferndale as I try to get information about Ferndale, the little community that I lived in until I was 14. It straddles, first of all, a U.S. highway, and the community is on the either side. And by the way, that community splits that community, the road splits that community into Flathead and Lake counties. And so when I'm looking at records, the school records, luckily, are a joint school district, so I can find the school census records for those people all the way back to 1911. But I can't find very much more because even in a city directory or in a rural directory that I'm describing today, I only see them as a rural or an RFD route with no addresses until the 80s, actually, until the 1980s. So it's been interesting to find it. I've had to do an awful lot of research in newspapers where I could find the gossip columns, thank goodness. But I really have to think about the kind of directories that I can find. And so far, even with a brand book, I've struck out. I've found 10 brands currently in the state brands across Montana at the brand inspector's site, but I haven't found a brand book per se. I know that Flathead County has had them, but I just haven't found one yet, nor have I found one for Lake County. So we're going to be talking about those things today and how valuable they are. But before we do that, I am going to go in to the share screen and show you some forms again that you have. The first one is a form, city county directory blank form that you can use. And I gave this to you actually in November. If you happen to be in on that meeting, if you're not, you can get it from me again. It's just a blank form that you can use with any city county directory or church directory or brand book, farm directories, all kinds of things, conservation district directories, because of course, the first thing you can do is modify my directory and put in the headings that you want to have. So this one happens to be PDF'd, but I do have it also in another version. So if you want it in the version that you can change around, just ask me via email and I'll make sure you get that. So there's this one. Then I sent you some farm and ranch notes today. And I have to tell you, they're not super complete deliberately because I found some other things. I know that some of you usually want the presentation, so you're going to have to tell me via email today if you want that. I have covered the main parts of it for you and the links that Cheryl provided so nicely. So you have that, and that will help you to get started with this today. Although there's a little more in here because I've got quite a few examples that I did not put into your notes. So I'll stop the share on that. And the next thing I'm going to do now is actually start the presentation from the beginning. And hopefully you're able to see this. Ranch and farm directories, brand books, various kinds of rural directories, because it's funny, but they haven't, you would think that they would, as there are fewer farms and fewer ranches and fewer brands and so on, that there wouldn't be as many books. But actually, that's not true. Publications are quite innovative today, and so you're going to see some that are actually, they can be site made for you, at least for section and township and so on. And I'll talk about that just briefly right here at the beginning. I want to thank Cheryl Lucas today for the contributions she made as I was out looking at brand books and giving you some ideas. Remember, we've already done at least 10 different kinds of directories in our quest this year, but I keep finding more, and these are unique to, I wanted to say, first of all, to the West, but they're not. They're also, you can find them in the Midwest. I found one that I've not been able to get the picture in time for y'all in New York even. And so they're out there. I guess they are unique in that most of them speak to land or to property, something like cattle or horses, with the brand books and the various rural directories. And so you do have to seek them. We do have many homestead maps, and I will just throw that in today. But as I do my talk a little later on about land, I'm going to be doing homestead maps, looking at those. So they're another type of thing. And frequently you'll see them in ranch and farm directories. You'll also see them in local history books, and they're pretty cool. So go-to places to find these rural directories. Online right now, HathiTrust. I know it says Hathi, but it's HathiTrust.org. And if you have not been out and seen that fabulous, mostly, well, it is free site, you are really missing a bet, because there are so many things that you can find there. I will be showing you some of the places to find rural directories there and a few other things. Memory projects across certain states. Now, Montana had a memory project. We still have a memory project, but for some reason, earlier this year, they decided to rename themselves as a Montana History Portal. I'm not sure that that's really an improvement. I just keep thinking of the things that I've handed out to you and to national groups talking about Montana's memory project and saying, oh, geez, now I need to go back and correct that and send out another one, at least to Legacy, so that they can update the materials that I've given them. Google, you can actually Google to find some of these rural directories, but you're going to have to pretty well know the name or be pretty close in it, because you need to make sure that you use quotation marks. It doesn't hurt to use those quotation marks in HathiTrust either, although they'll usually bring up many titles and give you many ways to get the information. You're going to find these at state historical societies and libraries. I've found a few out at familysearch.org. I've found some at agricultural organizations, and you're going to see a very pretty one today. I think it's pretty anyway, from a conservation district in Garfield County, Montana. You'll also occasionally find some things that have been put together by home demonstration clubs or for the various brand books, the stock growers early on, and for instance, organizations like Montana Cowbells. So we'll talk a little bit about that as we go along. And of course, local libraries. Our local library here in Great Falls has a Montana room on the third floor. It's adjacent to our library, and it has lots of especially rural telephone directories from across Montana. And what a neat facility to have, because they have them all the way back to the 1901s and 2s and 3s and so on for some selected areas. So think on your libraries also. I want to talk just for a second about what's happened today as people innovate contemporary directories for counties. You're still going to see things like polk directories. You can see them online, of course, or you can also see them bound in library edition, and they're pretty neat. There's also some commercial sites like the one I'm showing here, the Farm and Home Publishers Rural Directory Book, containing township maps of an entire county, showing plat maps sometimes with rural landowners on the left side and directory maps on the other. I did not get one in time to show you today, but I've given you that address so you can go out and hopefully look at some of those. I warn you, it's a commercial site, so you may have to do something to make sure that they don't follow you afterwards and bug you, thinking that you want to make your very own farm and directory. I'm going to show you the Garfield County, Montana Conservation District publication below. I think it's pretty cool. Looks like this. We happen to have it in our library. This one was published in 2010, prepared by a group. If you notice down here in the lower left corner, CICON, Sycon and Associates in Chester, Montana. William C. Albee is the cartographer for that. He does land surveying and GPS and so on. So there's another source for you. I sure hope it's still in business because these maps are really, really nice for Garfield County. And as you might imagine, it's difficult to find things for Garfield County. So here's one thing showing you exactly in Garfield County down there at the bottom on the left. It shows you exactly where this particular section is located within the county. It shows you the road systems that were there in 2010. It will show you, if you bring it up a little more, and I'm not going to try to do that here, but it will show you who owns what in what particular places. And it goes on for about nearly 100 pages. And at the end, it has a very, very nice index of all of these same places by section and so on. So be aware of the fact that there are potentially conservation maps out here, not just in our state. I would think we should check out Wyoming. We should check out Idaho, South Dakota, North Dakota, just to see what they might have, and also Washington and Oregon. So farm and ranch directory info is pretty specific, although it can vary from year to year. Kristen and I were looking at one this morning that had right in the middle of it, it evidently had a blank spot. So it had some recipes and so on in the middle of it because it didn't want to waste any of that space. You're always going to find the list of ranch and farmlands there by section and so on. You're going to find current information about local counties and towns and villages that is just invaluable because it's going to give you that information for that particular time and place. Very occasionally, it will have county or local maps. The best ones that I've seen for that, candidly, are that conservation district map that I just showed you. It's really, really fine. But it will show lists of farm and ranch owners across one county or more, plus their contact information. And it's going to also have business ads related to farm, ranch, and rural activities, and also the businesses that are related to those very, very small towns that are encompassed within that particular area. So you're going to see organization information sometimes too for things like Montana stock growers or Wyoming stock growers or Montana cowbells, all kinds of different kinds of ads. You'll also see ads for the government help that is available in that county, and also the county level help that is available there. Out at our Montana History Portal, remember I told you it used to be called the Montana Memory Project. That's out at our Montana Historical Society site. These are all available right now. Like, for instance, the Central Montana Farm Directory for 1949 and 50 actually covers not only Fergus, but Garfield, Wheatland, Marr, Judith Basin, Golden Valley, and Petroleum counties. Has a little map of each county, nothing special, has many advertisements, and it was published, it's been 72 years ago already, by the Lewistown Daily News and Argus Farmer. And that I believe no longer exists. But you're going to find lots of these directories, the Central Montana Farm Directories, courtesy of the wonderful people at the Lewistown Library who scanned all of these in and made sure that they are out at the Montana History Portal. And they are very, very helpful. Remember that these Central Montana Farm Directories are going to include people that are not in those Lewistown and vicinity Polk County directories. They're not all in there. So this is going to be quite helpful to you in terms of looking at things. A word of caution about these farm directories generally that I see. I only see that people are listed that are on the land. It does not tell you whether they are owners or renters or whether or not they have a lease. So that's more information in depth that you would have to go into within county records for the particular place. But these do give you a great way to begin to look at who owned land continuously across years and so on. I just wish we had more of these. If you've got some or you know of some and you would like to give them to our library, we would love to have them. If we find that it's a duplicate, we will share with another library, we promise. Well, that 1949-1950 directory that had a listing of farmers in 7 central Montana counties has their post offices and, wow, what a bonus, the legal location of the land. So it's very, very good with those 7 small county maps. I'm going to show you a few things from it. In a few minutes, evidently. The Central Montana Farm Directories are all here at the portal. We have them for this one. We have them again for Lewistown. And I hope I'm not going backward, but remember the coverage is vast. When you think of these little counties like Golden Valley and Petroleum, and Judith Basin, which did not become a county until the early 1920s. This is really, really great information for you because it's also going to let you know when that particular place came into being for the counties they cover. It's a nice little bonus. Well, for example, in that 1949-1950 directory, these are just the facts about Fergus County, but there were facts there when each and every county section started. So in 1949-50, the population for Fergus County, as shown in the 40 census, had been a little over 14,000. For 1948, they were estimating a little over 16. They showed you this area in square miles. That didn't change. They are showing you the taxable values. Wow. That's really a cool thing. Over about $11.5 million taxable values with acres of cropland at not 1 million, acres of rangeland at over 1 million acres. 90% of it is in private ownership. 10% is owned in some way by the public. That could be U.S. or state, remember. Shows you the annual average precipitation in inches, the county seat, the population of Lewistown, which appears to be a little over half of the population for Fergus County at that point. So it tells you a little bit about principal businesses. If you would have looked at the rest of the sheet, it would have told you a little more. But over on the right, it starts immediately with the Fergus County landowners, and it gives you the name of the person and wife or partner, the particular place within Fergus County that they live. Here's Joseph G. and Mary Barta living at Danvers in Section 20, Township 17, and Range 16. So it can be very, very helpful with this information. I always look for these when I go into public libraries and tell them, please don't get rid of these. These are really, really valuable. They're just as valuable as the city directories. So, for example, I thought I would throw in something here about the facts for Garfield. It only had 2,700 people in 1940 and 5,000 square miles, $2.5 million in taxable value, lots of cropland, rangeland, most all of the land, over 2 million acres in private ownership and 1 million in public. They got 14 inches of water on average. And they estimated that the population of Jordan in 1948, which is the county seat, was 800. So again, it would have a preponderance of the people there. So it gives you a very nice feel for what's going on. And it tells you here, by the way, that owners and renters are not designated. They're just going to give you the names. The people tell you what post office they're at. Remember, that's the post office they go to, and the section, the township, and so on, the range for their particular property, the legal description. But they'll do things like business ads. And they had Strain Brothers, selling agent for Sears and Roebuck at that point. And that's a very important point because eventually those Strain Brothers in Great Falls were just adjacent to and into what today, or what was for a long time, the downtown Sears and Roebuck store in Great Falls. But notice the first thing that they emphasized here. They were dealers in David Bradley farm implements, and that's the first thing they put in there. So there are very specialized ads, the things that they really thought people might need. And this ad, by the way, goes on for a whole page. They had things like Howland Chick Factory, Montana's finest baby chicks down in Lewistown. And they're saying, hey, if you need chicks, we've got them. My goal for a particular person was seeking the land ownership of a guy by the name of C.L. Bristol. He was actually of Moore, Montana. I figured he had to be in a book like this. I couldn't find him initially in GLO records because I couldn't be sure of what the C stood for, or if he'd put the L into a homestead list or not. So I wasn't having too much success for that. But I did find him. I found C.L. Bristol by himself at Moore, no spouse named, with, again, the particular township, the range, and so on listed. I had to look across a lot of these, and I advise you to do the same thing. Look across several counties so you are doing due diligence. I also looked for him, by the way, in the Lewistown directory and just saw C.L. Bristol, which didn't help me very much at all. So this particular kind of directory told me a great deal without me having to go to the official county records to look for his land at Moore. Moore had its part in this Central Montana directory also, advertising the Moore Hardware and Implement Company and what they might have. They had coal from Roundup, I can tell you that. Electrical goods, building materials. It looks like they did a little bit of everything. The Stevens Garage there was also a machine shop taking care of tractor repairs, automotive, taking care of, and being the Moore Farmers Oil Company also with rural bulk deliveries. And that would be quite valuable for people. Moore had refrigerated lockers. I remember the day back in Ferndale, Montana, back over in that little community that I came from, near the base of Swan Lake. We had refrigerated lockers at our local store because we didn't have food lockers. We didn't have the ice chests and so on that other people had. And early on, in fact, we were still collecting our ice out of Swan Lake. Prior to the 40s anyway. So it's interesting to see that Moore had a place for refrigerated lockers so that people could store their food if they didn't have the means to store a huge bunch of the meat that they had. The Denton Hardware and Implement Company advertised there with their tractors and their farm implements. And it's neat to see across these 7 counties how many of these different businesses there were to take care of local needs. Here's what the map of Fergus County, Montana looked like in terms of looking a little bit at some places and putting in just a few of the local places within the county. I warned you that the map is not real plain, but the neat feature is it does show adjacent counties, Blaine County, for example, and Choteau County. You'll find these at local libraries. I would check local real estate businesses and law offices candidly, because if they have a city directory collection, I'm willing to bet they also have a farm and ranch collection in order to be able to take care of fast referencing to the land owned by a particular person. You can look at local land abstract companies also, although I will tell you that most of them regard their material as needing to be closely held in hand. So you might have to explain yourself a little bit if you're looking for a particular thing. You might have to ask for the abstract and you might have to pay out some money there. I was looking for information about Big Fork and Ferndale, and what directions did I find? Well, I knew I had to look in Flathead and in Lake County. I knew Big Fork was in Flathead. Ferndale was in both of those counties. I knew I wasn't going to find a Ferndale listing. I tried early on by 1910. Nope. In fact, I found out that Ferndale finally called itself Ferndale in about 1920. And the very first time it called itself Ferndale, it said it was going to change its school name from the Swan School to the Ferndale School in 1920. I found it listed with other communities in those RFD routes. And unfortunately, when you have an RFD route, it does not have a map with it. I've not been able to find one anyway. Or it also does not have the actual place. So I found that Ferndale was listed with several others. It was listed with Swan Lake. It was listed with Swan River Community and Ferndale. So I had to really work to be sure the names that were in that particular place. Knowing about those rural free delivery routes is extremely helpful, because you're going to also be able to go to the post office, and sometimes they have saved their old post office books. I've seen one at Summers, Montana. My aunt happened to have it there when she was the postmaster at Summers, but she had the old books which showed quite clearly in the past where people had lived, and they were lined up neatly. She had several of them. I am just hoping that they are still there. If they're not, frequently you can find them in historical societies. They're a great resource. I did find a few directories at Ancestry, but the best coverage was at the Montana History Portal for us. Remember, that's that former MMP place. So that's some of the places. I'm not saying it's all of the places, but there were some mighty good places to look for these. Well, I found all of these. I mean, I was amazed when I started to do this little history of my community, because I found the guides of the farmers and the assessed valuation of the farmers and business directories beginning 1903 and 1904 at the back of the Kalispell and Flathead and Lincoln County directories. I found all of these particular things out at that Montana portal site. So I'm telling you, that's really a great thing to go out there and look at, or to even urge your local libraries to take the books that they've got and get them scanned so that more people can use them. I found these directories for the search I was doing to be tremendously helpful beginning in 1909 and going as far as I could find them. I also was able to look in the Kalispell Library, and they had one. Oh, well. I want to make you aware of a fantastic resource that is out at the Montana History Portal. It's the Leland Cade book collection. Now, what Leland Cade did is he said, I'm going to make some business directories for some places that I know, and I'm going to get into the newspapers and everything else I can and do a business directory. So these are compilations. They're not official books. Well, they are. Leland Cade did them, but he put them together as a special collection. He has a business directory that goes all the way from 1902 through 1934 for the Culbertson area and Culbertson. He has another one for Pioneer Fort Benton from 1860 through 1936. He has another one that is a Pioneer Roundup 1908 through 1936. I apologize, I didn't put the final figure on there, but it's 1936. So that's the Leland Cade stuff. I assume, I don't know that he's done any more. I have looked out recently and I found only a few. I think there are actually 5 or 6 of them, and I've named 3. I want to remind you that your local history books are directories, but you're going to have to verify the information, of course. The family report of lands owned, the actual homesteader records, the dates of residence. I've given you an example here of the homestead shacks over Buffalo Tracks, the history of northeastern Fergus County. I also looked in Big Sandy. Big Sandy, for its book, did a fantastic job about every 50 or 60 pages in that mammoth book of putting together a page that showed all the homesteads and had them named. Now, I went out to verify them, and here's how I verified them. When I found the homesteader record, yes, that's right, I took time because I was indexing that big book. I went out to the GLO records, the GLO records.blm.gov, and looked to see if that was the actual name of the original homesteader. And I did find a few changes that I could recommend, although what I did in the index is I just said, actually, this was such and such's homestead, and it was a family member or whatever. But you can verify some of these easily. The homesteader records are pretty easy to verify out there. And if we could ever get a list of the relinquishments for that particular area, that would be great too. Haven't seen that one yet, although the relinquishments are available for 4 areas out at Family Search. I know that Kalispell, Flathead, and Cascade, the relinquishments are verifiable there. So they're a pretty neat record to have, because remember, if somebody started out to homestead and they didn't complete it, they will not be in those government land office records. Or not easily anyway. Yes, you can find them, but it's not easy. I was looking through that pretty neat Montana history portal and found this really great book in 1918, Hints from a Practical Farmer, from the U.S. Reclamation Service. And that was a pretty neat book because it did all kinds of things. One of the most wonderful things that it did for farmers was it looks like it was a publication every year for a while. And at the back, they gave you blank record forms to record all of your potential tax information for that particular time. So if you're looking at this book, you get a real bonus at the end of it. I recommend that you go out and take a look. Let's talk about some brand book links. Cheryl Lucas found some of these for me yesterday, and I'm going to concentrate. I know that in Montana, we have a brand inspector. You can go to the Montana Brand Inspector site and find the current books. We also have lots of these brand books in our library, but we never have enough. And unfortunately, they go across several counties. So we don't always have enough to put in with each county collection. I wish we did. If you find these and you're willing to give it up, please let us know. In Wyoming, Cheryl found for us this wonderful site, and I've made sure that this is in your notes, I believe, so that you can go out and take a look at Wyoming brand book links. You can go out and look at one that she found at the University of Pennsylvania Library. You can look at Montana Memory, which I'm hoping they will change, or they will have changed eventually to the Montana History Portal. Otherwise, that little link's going to disappear. Torrington is probably from Wyoming, I'm going to guess, although I could be wrong. It looks like it is Wyoming. The North Dakota Stockman Organization has their brand book available. You'll find things in Idaho. And you're looking, these sites are all very different. So don't assume that you're going to find them under one term. Begin collecting those very, very valuable sets of terminologies for yourself. In Idaho, it looks like they've included things. You can look at brand-book-public, and that's a little different from looking in Wyoming, where you can look to see brand recording, or in Montana, where you can look for livestock brand research or whatever. You have to put down the information that you see that will help you get to those books. Otherwise, you could skip right past them. But all of these will take you to some sites where you're going to have some very compelling information. Remember, brands started a long time ago. There was a reason for them, a totally legal reason. You are going to find a great deal about brands and brand inspection and branding law, et cetera, in each state under the legislative books that you can find out online, the laws for Wyoming, the laws for North Dakota, the laws for Montana, and so on. So you need to go look there so that you can see what it is. I have had I have had to tell people when they said, "Oh boy, I can see the brand here in this book." Does that mean I own it? Because I must, because that's my ancestor. No, you need to look at the rules for brands very, very carefully, because they need to be renewed every so often, and it's cold hard cash to be able to do that. You'll also find that a particular ranch, for example, might have way more than one. I've seen as many as 14 brands for one particular ranch alone. The brand inspector there is still there in a state to help you with that information. You are going to find some Montana brand records, full text, out at that site I told you about earlier, the Hati Trust. I found some pretty fascinating things, full text. The report of the Board of Stock Commissioners for 1887 through 1889. And that had some very, very neat information on early problems with brands. You'll see a brand book of the Montana Stock Grower Association for 1899. And in Montana, I have to tell you, the stock grower associations remain very, very, and grow large all through the 40s and 50s. And so you will see that I've got things named here for 1900, 1903, Marks and Brands for 1909. That one, it was originally at Google Books, so you'll still find it there, but you'll find, I think, the better copy of it at Hati Trust. And again, for 1908 and 1910. I haven't named all of these. I'm just giving you some ideas of some places you can go. Sometimes it's very helpful to begin with the year instead of, you might do 1899 Montana Stock Growers Association instead of Brand Book 4, but it all depends. These were as they were named on their covers. I found another really neat one, a comprehensive index to the Westerners brand books. These are just books, remember. These are not individual people. These are all the different kinds of brand books available. And it was the second revised and enlarged edition, which covered from 44 through 61. Well, 1961, folks, is already, wow, that's a long time ago. That's 60 some years ago. So that's a very valuable book. I found that at HathiTrust. I'm just showing you some of these things that I've seen that we, for example, have in our library, and you may have in your local library, for example, up in Conrad or down in Lewis town or in Helena. You'll find a brand book for Glacier, Toole, Pend Oreille, and Liberty counties. That covers 4. So that's going to have some very, very valuable information in it. Or the Farm and Ranch Directory for $49.50 for this particular case. Here's one for the 2000s for Yellowstone, Bighorn, and Musselshell counties. Now, Yellowstone has a lot of acreage. It's pretty big. Bighorn is too, but Bighorn has a very small population, and Musselshell's population is not very big either. So it's very helpful to have these books. If you come across them in garage sales or whatever, we'd love to have copies, or make sure that your local library has a copy and we'll keep it. They are very, very helpful for genealogists. So here's a big one. The brands of Blaine, Hill, Liberty, Phillips, Valley, and Choteau counties. Oh my gosh, that's a lot again. That's 6 counties. And it was put out by the North Central Montana Stock Growers Association. Sometimes you can go and find these Stock Grower Association libraries locally if they happen to have a place where they keep their records within the county or within the area. I've only seen one, and I think the guy who had it really felt it was privately a little more his, although he held it open. So you're going to see a lot of these different ones, even for Cascade County in June 55 through June 57 over here in the gray on the right. You'll see that the directory is there for Cascade, Teton, Choteau, Judith Basin counties. That's a lot. All of those had a lot of acreage. By then, it's hard to believe, but by 55 to 57, we also didn't have as many farmers. Remember, after the wars, many people went a lot of other places, and a lot of those places diminished in terms of farm real estate and ranch real estate as a result. Pend Oreille had a farm and ranch directory for $49.50. I'm seeing right here in the left on the bottom, you'll see how we've got it classified in our library. And you can see again, this one is just telling you who the person is. And immediately after the person, they're telling you what the legal land description is and what the post office is. So it's a slightly different organization, but very easy to read. Remember the laws of the times. Stock Laws of Montana was published by the Montana Stock Growers Association in 1912, and you can find those early stock laws out there. They are fascinating. You'll find this full text. If you had a ranching family early on from the 1890s to about 1925, you want to take a look at that. That's interesting. I'm showing you the ones for Montana, but others are there available for other states, and I hope that they have put them places that are directly accessible like this and that are full text. The Livestock Sanitary Laws of Montana. For 1919, I really was excited when I saw this one quite some time ago, because my grandpa, Oscar Lee, had a dairy farm 14 miles out of Havre, Montana. And it wasn't until I got to look at the newspapers that I realized that the newspapers regularly told who did make the milk inspection for the week or the month and who did not. Gosh, I didn't even know there was a thing of milk inspection for the raw milk that was being sold. But my grandpa had a route in Havre that he was selling milk to. And so he was subject to inspection. And 2 times I found that for the week, he had to go back and withdraw his milk. So that was very, very valuable. And the livestock sanitary laws of Montana gave me the rationale for the rules and regulations, and also a great deal of other information about early slaughterhouses and milk and at the creameries and cheese baking. Vintage telephone directories are extremely valuable, especially today, because we're finding that they are going the way of the dodo bird. This happens to be one for Devon, serving Dunkirk and Galata and Lothair up in northwestern Montana, this side of the Continental Divide. It had Etheridge and North Cut Bank and Kevin and Oilmont, Sunburst, Sweetgrass. And then, wow, it also has, and I hope you can see it, the alphabetical listing for Coutts, Alberta on the other side of the border. It would have that because, of course, people went to and for, they went across all of the time. You will find these vintage telephone directories in your local libraries, I hope. And if you don't, and you find some of them, you need to begin scanning these, because once they're gone, they are totally gone. And they're valuable in a different way again, in terms of telling you which farmers and ranchers actually had telephone access. Or were they like my husband's relatives 5 miles out of Harlowton in 1912, and they had telephone access, but it was their own locally for only about 5 miles, and they strung the wire along barbed wire fences. I found that fascinating. But there, of course, there was no need for a directory. They all knew their neighbors, and so we don't have a directory for that one. We just have a description of it in the local Harlowton newspaper. So those directories are going to be found in local libraries and the history portal. And I can show you right in our library here, for example, the Buffalo and Judith Gap telephone directories for 37, and then the Central Montana directories again that would go just right along side by side with those farm and ranch directories in 25, 37, 45, 46, and 47. These are just great things. And of course, our Montana room here on the 3rd floor of the Great Falls Public Library is a very large Montana room, and it has a fantastic collection of these early telephone directories. Y'all come down and stop in and see us. I just want to tell you also that if you're looking at North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Idaho, there are things like this that I found out at Ed.D. Trust. The 1936 North Dakota livestock brand record. It was too late for my family. They'd already lost their land there. I wish they would have had one for about 1918 or 1919 that I could see. But you need to look at these sites, because these sites are scanning more things in all the time. And so are the local or the state historical libraries. So look to see what they have. Wyoming brand books and references have been published. There are early ones there out online in 1883, 1884, 1885. There's a really neat book out there at the Ed.D. Trust by Maurice Frink, written in 1954 about the cow country cavalcade, and it's a history of the Wyoming stock growers. Now, I know we have a history of the Montana stock growers, but I don't have that in our library yet. So you'll see things like this Wyoming Cattle Trails book out there, the history of the migration of Oregon-raised herds. Think about that, going to Western market, and some of it was prior to established railroad for being able to do something like this. You'll find a few Idaho stock records and brands. I found this neat one out online again at Haughty Trust, the United Cattle and Horse Growers Association of Idaho for 1916, actually published at McKay, Idaho. And if you're looking for things in areas among these people, these directories are just a fantastic thing for you to be able to look at. Well, that's what I'm telling you today about our particular topic. I hope you found it successful. I hope that some people out there, I'm looking at what Cheryl said. I'm looking here again. She found the Montana History Portal livestock brand registrations from 1873 through 1980. Barb Shank says, thank you very much. I hope these things help. As you begin, my goal when I'm doing directories for you is to begin to help you look for other kinds of directories, unusual kinds of directories that are available, especially for these rural areas. Remember that in most all of our states, we did not have great growth in population until the 20th century. If you're looking for some of these early directories, it can be really a fantastic help for you with these. So with that, I will stop